Hi there, Matt Allington here. Today is Thursday, the 8th of December. It's been just over a week since I gave my last river update, so this is update number 11. Just a reminder, 3 links on the screen. If you want to see these videos, they're all in a playlist on the first link on the screen. If you want to play with the report that I've built, there's an interactive report there, second link on the screen. And if you want to learn how to build these reports, have a look at my training offerings, third link on the screen. Okay, so let's go and take a look at the report. Okay, so once again today I'm going to start on this lower system view map. I think it's the best helicopter view of what's going on. So as usual, let's start up at Wackle Junction. This is the junction where the Murray and a whole lot of tributaries come in. I'm pretty sure the Lachlan comes in before this. There's also the Wackle River. So a couple of observations. Note that it peaked back here at some time ago. You could sort of see it if we sort of go back a bit, but it's been pretty much the peak. I think that was in here, 167, something like that. This is going back maybe 3 weeks ago now. But notice that it's very consistent now. It's running at about 164 gigalitres per day. So a lot of water still coming through from Wackle Junction, albeit about 3 to 4 gigalitres a day off the peak. Secondly, note that the Murrumbidgee is still pretty high, so the peak was 53.3, so we're just a little bit off the peak at the moment, so there is more water upstream. We'll go and have a look at that in a moment, but it looks like consistently we're going to get around 163 plus 51, so a bit below this number here, this 220, but notice that coming down to Lock 15, it's pretty much consistent now with the current water that's coming through those two. So pretty much that prediction that all that water would come down has come true. Also, in one of the previous videos, I talked about this behaviour here on Lock 15, how it came off the peak, and I predicted that it would go back up based on the water that was coming in from the Murrumbidgee, and that's pretty much followed through. So I think we can guarantee that at this stage, that's the most water. There is more water upstream, particularly in the Darling. But now we've got to focus on this water from Lock 15 and see where that's going. So 217 peak here, still increasing. And we've got this consistent 17 gigs coming in from the Darling. This really hasn't changed like forever. So that seems to be like the regular flow out of the Darling. And so that's presumably going to get added, and we'll end up with this number closer to 237. But this 237 is adding up all of these three blacks. So if I switch over here to Lock 15, so let's forget about what's upstream. We'll just say this is what's happening in Lock 15, 217 peak plus 17. So it looks to me, I can't see any reason why we're not going to get this sort of 230 gigs or so coming down into Lock 10. So let's go and have a look at how Lock 15 plus the water from the Darling comes down into Lock 10. So we can do that over here on the flow. So here's Lock 15 and Lock 10 overlaid on each other. Notice that there's actually a gap here. There's more water coming down Lock 10 than there is Lock 15, and that's because, of course, the extra water that comes in from the Darling. And if I have a look at the gap between those two, 29 to 48, so whatever this is, about sort of 17, 18, which is pretty much the amount of water coming in from the Darling. Now notice that the gap has actually reduced and even flipped here, but my prediction is that that will go back to the way it was. It seems that when a surge of water comes through, the alignment between the higher up the river and lower down the river, they get out of whack. But eventually, once that surge goes all the way through, they seem to get back into alignment. So my tip is that we're going to get another 15 or so gigalitres on top of what is coming through Lock 10 now. So if we go back there, I'm pretty much saying that I think this Lock 10 number here, 215, is going to go up more like 230 in the coming weeks. Okay, so just moving on, you'll notice that I don't have a reading here for Lock 10 flow in 1974. 74 was a relevant year because certainly at Big Bend, Shack went about a metre, 1200 underwater, and so we're at the highest point at Big Bend. So if we go under, pretty much anyone with a ground floor Shack will go under. The places that are elevated will only get the down section wet. But notice I didn't have a data point back in 1974, but I do have this combined data point, so of 229. And so we're currently sitting at 215 on log 10. I'm predicting 230 is going to come down, which basically means we're going to get the same amount of water coming down as in 1974, and therefore, all things being equal, I would expect to see a similar flood level as to 1974. Now, as I have mentioned previously, one of the potential saving graces is Lake Victoria. In my video last time, about 7 or 8 days ago, I talked about the fact that there was no water that being taken in to Lake Victoria. It seemed that the Murray Basin Water Authority was perhaps emptying out the lake to create some storage capacity so that they can bring some water in as the peak comes down. They've started to do that, so they've been taking in 3 gigs a day. They're up to 6 now. I don't have a reading for today as yet, but keep in mind that there's 110 gigalitres capacity, and so if they take 10 gigalitres a day, they're only going to get 10 days coverage. But if you come up here and look at what's been happening at Wakell Junction, this has been running at peak levels for way more than 10 days. So this, to me, is going to do limited good. They'll be, and also they're bringing the water in too soon, in my view. They're not taking the peak off because they're filling this up now, where the peak is not here yet. It looks like it's going to be, well, I don't know how far away, but a couple more weeks away. Okay, so then ultimately this is going to come down to SA. So this is a timing issue at the moment, so it's still relatively low at 159 is our current peak. But once again, all of these waters, I'm pretty sure we're going to get this 25 extra gigalitres per day. Okay, let me jump over to the other maps. So we'll just have a look at the upstream flooding. And you can see that all of the upstreams floods have now well and truly peaked. And so this is obviously going to come down, and it's just really a matter of how much of these waters come down and when they come down. So let's go and have a look at those individually. So the Darling up at Burke is way off its peak now. And you can see that pretty much it seems to be peaking at Tilpa now. So the waters come from Burke. It's made it down to Tilpa. Once again, lots of lakes and wetlands and storage facilities in here. Even though most of the storage facilities are still full, these are not rigid boundaries, and I would expect that the landmass outside of the river will absorb some of the peak flow. So you can see that Wilcannia and this other point here, I'm not exactly sure what it is, Talia, there's another point just here, those 2 points together are now starting to get at a high point. So if we see this sort of 136 come down, so remember this is the Darling, so 136, let's go back and have a look at what happened in the flood years. If you have a look at what came into Burtundi, which is basically the entry point here, back in 56, the really big flood, we had about 60 gigalitres a day coming in. So, given that was such a big flood, it would be hard to see that we'd get much more than that. But also, I think that this is going to take a bit of time. So by the time this water comes down, I would expect that most of this other water has already gone. So I'm just going to have a look at the Lachlan. So this doesn't look like a real threat to me. Obviously, it was a real threat to the people upstream at the time. But if you have a look here at what's happening at point 4 at Condobolin, you'll see that the peak was only at 40, and as it comes down into these tributaries and wetlands, you'll see that really not much impact at all. But these waters will flow into the Murrumbidgee, I believe, at some point in time. Jumping over to the Murrumbidgee, and once again you'll see it's peaked here, Nareda, a long time ago, Darlington Point, Carrefour, even the Hay Plain. And these other data points, you can see that it seems to have peaked at Balranald. But once again, I believe that peak at Balranald may be from an earlier flood, or I could be wrong on that. It's a bit hard to say. This water, say 0.4 here, the Hay Weir 72. Yeah, so maybe that is the peak. And if that's the case, we would expect that the water coming in from the Murrumbidgee now might have peaked. And if we go back to this lower system view, that this has peaked, then that's good news to suggest that this plus this, which has also peaked, is not going to get any higher than 74, particularly given the water from the Darling is not going to come down until well after this surge from the other two sources has passed. Let's go up and have a look at the Mid-Murray. And so once again, it's peaked upstream. This Wakul-Murrumbidgee combination once again appears to have peaked. So that's it. My assessment of the situation then is that we're going to have effectively a 74 flood. Water levels coming into SA of around this number here, 180 or thereabouts, maybe even a little bit more. So that's my prediction. That's the update for this week. So I will give another update when I have something material to share.